On January 27th of this year, an op-ed appeared in the Akron Beacon Journal. Its title was "Why I Changed My Thinking on Abortion." The piece was a thoughtful exposition by a committed Catholic and six-term congressman who, until then, had always considered himself pro-life. Now he said, quote, "After gaining a deeper understanding of the complexities and emotions that accompany the difficult decisions that women and families make when confronted with these situations, it is clear that the heavy hand of government must not make this decision for women and families." Woo! The author of this typically compelling op-ed was Congressman Tim Ryan, who I am so proud to call my friend. Congressman Ryan and I have actually been working together for about 10 years, and we first worked together on the first ever of its kind pro-life, pro-choice abortion bill in Congress, an experience that was and will always remain a peak highlight of my entire career. I have known Congressman Ryan to grapple with all of the tough issues, and he's always open to addressing intractable issues with new and open perspectives. It's not surprising that Congressman Ryan is also the author of a book called A Mindful Nation: How a Simple Practice Can Help Us Reduce Stress, Improve Performance, and Recapture the American Spirit, and The Real Food Revolution: Healthy Eating, Green Groceries, and the Return of the American Family Farm. Whether co-chairing the Congressional Manufacturing Caucus and working to reform U.S. trade policies to ensure the well-being of his Ohio constituents, or ensuring our nation's financial well-being on his role as a powerful member of the Appropriations Committee and Budget Committee, Representative Ryan is always thoughtful in his choices and unafraid to speak his mind. A tireless champion for working family issues, he himself has now earned that status. Congressman Ryan is the proud first-time father of an adorable 10-month-old baby boy called Brady. Yay, Tim. It is truly my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Congressman Tim Ryan.
Thank you so much. You know you're getting old when the biggest thrills you get in life are your 10-month-old baby biting on your ear and slobbering all over you. But it's a joy, and a long way from where we started with Rachel. But first, let me thank Rabbi Pesner so much for having me here and all of your leadership. We know you have big shoes to fill, but you're up to the job, and we're here to help you. Rabbi Namath, thank you so much. Rabbi Rick Jacobs and Rabbi Steve Fox for all their work. I know they're not here. And thanks for having me. You know, Rachel mentioned this evolution that I had with my position on abortion, and I came to Congress 13 years ago and was a pro-life Catholic, just honestly didn't give a whole lot of thought to the issue. Thought, you know, 12 years of Catholic school, I thought I knew what my position should be. And when I got here, I don't know why, but I thought, how can I get into the middle of the abortion wars? And there's got to be a way to figure this out. I attribute it to being half Irish, and the saying that the Irish have, is this a private fight or can anyone get into it? So, having several Irish staffers along the way, we all jumped in, and we thought we could figure it out, and we worked with Rachel and tried to figure out a way to bridge the divide. And through that process, I met a number of women who had been in very, very difficult circumstances, and slowly over those 13 years changed my votes changed my position, never made any real public statements about it, just quietly shifted as my awareness grew, as I was able to sit with women. And then I got married, and what was already clear somehow became clearer as we were having Brady, and going through those doctor visits where you get tests for this and tests for that, and make sure this isn't wrong and this isn't wrong, make you a nervous wreck, as you all know. And they tell me that that's just the beginning of being nervous about your kids. And after 10 months, I can say that's true. And we were sitting in the doctor's office, I remember, and we had to take a test, and we were waiting for the results to come back. And my wife and I were sitting there, and it became very, very apparent to me that as difficult as this circumstance may be, there is absolutely no place for Uncle Sam in this doctor's office with us. Just no place for him. And there's no way to possibly account for, from Washington, D.C. or any state capital, to account for every single circumstance that could possibly reveal itself in a process as complex as pregnancy. So we thought, my staff and I thought that it was time to make a public statement, and we wrote the op-ed in the Akron Beacon Journal, and we came out publicly as a pro-choice member. So let me just, I want to talk about a few things here to this group in particular that I think you may be interested in. First, I want to just say that my heart goes out to the men and women and citizens of the city of Baltimore. To see what's happening there kind of encapsulates so much of what is happening in the United States with relationships between some of our poorest citizens and the police departments across the country, the economic inequality, education systems, and all the rest. We're seeing this all come to a head in many of our cities. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we can have new hope, and I do have new hope, on how we can address the issue of poverty in the United States. And this is not going to be, I don't think, a traditional poverty speech, because I think, as a Democrat, I want to be a part of a party and a political system that is trying to inject new ideas, that is trying to look at problems differently. And I think there are a couple of issues that we need to address when it comes to poverty, income inequality, and how we solve them. And I believe that the number one problem we have in Washington, D.C. is we see every governmental program or agency in a silo. And, for example, we have agricultural policies. This is our food system policy in this silo. We have an education silo. We have a healthcare silo. We have a criminal justice silo. And the problem that we have an economic development silo, how we stimulate commerce. And the problem is you can't address these issues looking at them separately. We have to take a step back and look at how they are interconnected. And that ultimately is how we're going to really approach this in a way that is manageable and solvable. We have to see these issues as interconnected. We talk about a young kid in Baltimore and Youngstown or Akron, Ohio, or in some of the cities that you come from. We say, boy, we got to fix the education system. Well, you can't fix the education system if the kids coming into the schools don't have proper nutrition. And I'm not just talking about having something to eat. I'm talking about good, wholesome food that is going to allow their brain to work properly when they go into the classroom. So we need to get back to the fundamentals. You know, in Washington, a lot of times we think, boy, there's a very complicated, complex problem. And if we just come up with a more complicated, complex solution, we may actually fix the complicated, complex problem. But the reality is we need to get back to the fundamentals. So if we're going to deal with education, we got to see its link to food. And you can't have economic development, you can't have innovation, entrepreneurship, research and development happening, and economic growth if you don't have education. You don't have education unless you got good, healthy food to eat. And you're not going to have a healthy society if you're not talking about teaching, educating people on what to eat. And all of this should happen in our schools. And then we want to talk long-term about how do we balance the budget? How do we reduce the deficits in the national debt? I'm as concerned about that as any conservative Tea Party Republican is. I have 3 kids, too. I don't want to pass along debt to them. But I certainly don't want to tell my mother that we're going to whack her Medicare and cut her benefits, and she has to bear the burden of mistakes that were made in the past decade. And I won't get into any of those because that's a whole other speech. But so how do we reduce long-term health care costs in the entitlement programs, primarily Medicare and Medicaid? Well, when you see that half the country in the next 5 years is going to have either diabetes or pre-diabetes, many of those folks are in the Medicare and Medicaid system. You don't have to look very far to figure out how we can solve this problem. And we know that diabetes, in many instances, type 2 diabetes, in many instances, not all instances, but in many instances, can be reversed with proper diet, nutrition, and exercise if it's not too far along, which ties back to the food, the education, growing the economy in a way that's balanced and sustainable. So all of this, if we see as interconnected, I believe we have an opportunity to fix the system. So let me just briefly talk about food. In Ohio, our #1 sector of the economy, top performing, agriculture. Okay? Ag. Almost 2 million Ohioans are food insecure out of 11+ million people. Our top industry is agriculture. And I think it's 20 to 25% of our kids are food insecure. Now, if that doesn't scream we have a broken system, I don't know what does. So how do we fix it? I believe that together we need to push policies that are going to allow us to grow healthy food to get into our markets that's affordable for everyone. And again, let's look at the system. So we take a bunch of your tax money and we subsidize crops in the United States that go into highly processed food. Okay, your tax money, and makes it very, very cheap and very, very accessible. Even if you don't have a grocery store, you can access this food. Then we have half the country is going to have diabetes or pre-diabetes. Because we're a compassionate country, we then subsidize health care to take care of the people who get sick because they're eating highly processed foods that come cheap because we subsidize them and make them cheap. Those foods don't actually reflect the total cost of what the foods actually are. So my ideas, a few things. Let's move the subsidies somewhat. So what do we got to do? We got to reduce the risk for farmers, right? They're in a business. The farmers aren't the enemy here. They are in a system that was built for them, and they're continuing to play in that system. We need to reduce the risk for farmers. We need to create markets. In Ohio, for example, Columbus, let's say. Ohio State University the Ohio State. Just in case someone's filming this and it makes its way back to Ohio, I need to say this properly. The Ohio State University, 60,000 students. In Franklin County, where Ohio State is, thousands, tens of thousands of K through 12 students. So if those schools and the Ohio State University said, you know, next year we're going to buy 1% of our food budget is going to be from locally sourced farms, fresh fruits and vegetables is what we want. Maybe, poultry without antibiotics, for example. This is just an idea. And all the schools said that too. All the K through 12 schools said that. And the next year we're going to do 2%. The next year we're going to do 4%. Next year we're going to do 6%. You are going to create a market for the local Central Ohio farmers that's not overseas or anywhere else. It's right down the street. So you're going to reduce your transportation costs. You're going to increase environmental benefits. And you're going to provide locally sourced food to those group of people. There's also prisons that spend a lot of money on food. We can create a market. And the farmer's not going to do it all overnight, and they may not do it for their whole farm, but it may be 5% or 10%. And at the same time, you take a city like Youngstown, Ohio. We used to have 170,000 people in Youngstown. Now we have 60-ish. So we have a lot of old, dilapidated homes, a lot of room. With the proper federal investment, like the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, we need to continue to take down those dilapidated homes and put in and make investments in urban agriculture in these cities, and you reduce the food deserts. So in the military, they call that investment a force multiplier. That's what I want. That's what every taxpayer wants. You want one investment to have multiple benefits. We're taking down a home, we're putting up gardens, we're creating summer jobs, we're filling up and getting rid of food deserts, we're building community, all with one investment. That, to me, is how you begin to end poverty, because all of a sudden, we're getting back to the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling, good food. You ask a lot of kids, where do you get a tomato? Where's a tomato come from? Grocery store. Now, my Italian grandparents are rolling over in their graves when they think tomatoes come from a grocery store. We need to teach that, and you tie in the schools. We have a bill we're going to drop in the next few weeks to put a salad bar. The goal is to put a salad bar in every single school in the United States of America. Now, that doesn't sound like I'm going to go to Iowa and New Hampshire and campaign on that for president, right? But it starts to paint the picture of the kind of system that we want. Now, we have a lot of school districts in Ohio and across the country. 70, 80, 90% of the kids in the school will be Medicaid, free and reduced lunch. I'm sure you all work with those kids and those families. Now, we'll sit there and we'll wait and we'll say, well, when you get sick, Medicaid program will take you in. When you get diabetes, we'll take you in, as we should. But why wouldn't we make investments on the front end to teach them what to eat, how to eat, and investments in their neighborhood that will give them access to the kind of food to make sure that they don't get diabetes in the long run, and bend the cost curve on Medicaid, and then we have investments to make into their schools so that we can put in social and emotional learning and 3D printing, and we don't have to ask for pay-to-play for sports. We don't have to get rid of the art and music programs because we will have money to reinvest back into that school. And those provide avenues for young kids to grab something that they love and get excited about and pull themselves up. They're healthy, they can think, they're clear, they're focused, and they're ready to move themselves forward so we can build resilient kids. When I played sports, if we had a bad run, like basketball, you get into the middle of the season, and then you hit a little slump and you lose 2 or 3 games. Our coaches, and football too, our coaches would always, the next practice, it was like the first practice of the year. You'd block, you'd tackle, you'd shoot free throws, you'd do your defensive drills. You didn't get in all the complexities of all the sophisticated plays that got you to the point where you went back to the fundamentals. And I think we have an opportunity to get back to the fundamentals, and you are on the front lines of doing that. And we clearly, me, Ryan, Annie, my staff, we want to work with you to help make this happen. I want to make one last idea, suggestion. Rachel mentioned I wrote a book called A Mindful Nation. And I don't bring that up just because you can go to Amazon.com and buy it. Although Brady's diapers are getting expensive, so we will welcome the help. I have seen, now this is about the practice of mindfulness, which is a form of meditation to ground yourself in the present moment. But I don't get caught up on just the mind. I'm talking about attention practices and awareness practices. Our children today have challenges that I'll be 42. I didn't have growing up, and I think some of my friends in their 30s didn't have the bombardment of information, the economic insecurity, the economic inequality. I think if we have a poverty or a program where we want to reduce poverty, and food is a big piece of that, I think the next piece should be something that science is beginning to show us has some real positive benefits. And if you look at the science of practices like mindfulness, where it reduces stress. Now, there's all kinds of different stress. If you're worth $1 billion and you're running a hedge fund, there's a certain kind of stress there, I would imagine. I hope I get that problem one day to maybe find out. But if you're a single mom with 2 kids, there's a tremendous amount of stress. If you're a veteran, post-traumatic stress. In an fMRI machine that they put on your head to figure out what's going on in your brain, it's like an MRI takes a picture, an fMRI is more of like a movie. It's all the same. So that young, precious little child that's 8 or 9 or 10 years old in a school district where there's high rates of violence, tough neighborhood, maybe domestic violence in their own home, their brain has, and they have, post-traumatic stress. And what you find out when we look at the science is that we have different regions of our brain. And when you're under high levels of stress for long periods of time, you have this old part of your brain called your amygdala. It gets really cranked up. And you're in fight or flight mode. We've all heard of fight or flight. So you're ready to go. Well, these kids in these dangerous neighborhoods, violent homes, are in a constant state of fight or flight. So we say, well, if we only spend more money on them, maybe that'll work out. Well, not necessarily if their brain is not equipped to learn. What we've seen with the studies that the military has done is that these attention practices, like mindfulness, calm your amygdala down. And the problem when you're in fight or flight is you shut down the other areas of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, where you handle your decision-making, your working memory, control of your attention span, all done here. So when you're in fight or flight, you can't access the very part of your brain you need to access in order to be a good citizen, a good student, a high achiever academically. You can't even access it. So if we're going to reduce poverty, if we're going to go into these school districts, we better have some programs, and I think art and music and social and emotional learning programs can do this as well. I think the mindfulness and attention practices can expedite and help make it quicker. But if we don't have a program that says we're going to help we know what's going on with this kid. He's in fight or flight. He's got post-traumatic stress. What can we do? There's these programs, breathing techniques, meditation techniques that can help calm the amygdala, allow you to access your prefrontal cortex. So I'm proposing an anti-poverty program that gets back to the fundamentals. And I don't know what parent in America, regardless of Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green, Reform, Constitution Party, doesn't want their child, when you call their name, to look up at you and pay attention. I have this thing with one of my kids. I won't say it publicly because they are taping it, but I'll call their name out 4 times, and then they'll pick their head up out of the device and they'll say, "Why are you yelling at me?" Well, because I just called your name 17 times and you didn't listen. I was glad there wasn't an emergency going on here, you know? But these kids, we are responsible. We are responsible, each of us. And all the work that you do, I believe we are responsible not just for doing the work, but also for bringing the ideas forth that are actually going to end poverty in the United States of America. And I will say that we can do it. I don't think anything I just presented to you is somehow out of the realm of possibility. There are urban garden programs all over the United States. There are school garden programs all over the United States. We're knocking down buildings in cities across the United States. There's mindfulness in schools in the United States. The Seattle Seahawks are practicing mindfulness. Corporations all across the United States are doing it. The United States Marine Corps is doing it because of the benefits of it. Now, we can sit and wait for another generation of kids, and we can wait for more Baltimores and more Clevelands and more issues that we have to deal with, or we can play offense. And we can say, we're not afraid to put out new ideas. We understand that there's going to be people that are going to take shots. Oh, you know, the liberals, they want to go out and they want to build a garden, and that's going to solve all our problems in the United States. And you know you're going to hear it, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, Congressman wants kids to sit and breathe, you know? I didn't mean for that to be funny at all. You know what? I do. You know why I want them to breathe? You know why I want them to sit there and breathe? Because the University of Wisconsin and Harvard and the University of Miami and Yale and Stanford and UCLA and the University of Toronto tell me that this helps the kids with their post-traumatic stress. And it helps the veterans with their post-traumatic stress. So if you want to make light of it, if you want to make jokes about it and continue to push ideas that aren't working, you can do that. But those of us who are looking to make a big difference, which you have over the years and you will continue to do, we're going in another direction. And I look forward to partnering with you as we move forward with these new ideas. I think there's a ton that we can be able to do together in communities all over the United States. And as Bobby Kennedy said at the end of his very brief campaign, he had this great saying, "I do not promise you ease. I do not promise you comfort. But I do promise you these: weariness, hardship, and sacrifice. And with these, I promise you victory." Thank you so much.